12-year-old Callan Ward stepped carefully through the soft blue grass of the Velithari meadows, his boots crunching gently as he moved farther away from the Terran embassy dome behind him. The sky above was a swirl of lavender clouds and shimmering stars with the planet's twin moons rising like silver coins. Callan had grown bored of listening to diplomats talk politics inside all day, and he wanted adventure, real adventure. He wandered until he reached a small hill covered in glowing crystal flowers that lit the air around them. Just as he reached to pick one, he heard a soft humming sound behind him. Spinning around, Callan's breath caught in his throat. Standing there was a girl, no, not a human girl, but something different. She was Velithari, tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like glass lit from inside and long hair that moved like flowing starlight. Her eyes glowed softly, curious but not afraid. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice like music. Callan stammered, unsure what to say, but the girl tilted her head, smiled, and stepped closer. "I won't tell," she added. That made Callan relax a little, and they sat under the crystal tree together, two children from different worlds. She introduced herself as Ilari, daughter of the High Matriarch, though she didn't act like a princess. She asked Callan about Earth, about oceans and rain, and what chocolate tasted like. He asked her about the glowing trees and the singing birds that changed color. They talked for hours until the moons were high. Then, with her hand in his, Callan made a bold promise. "When I grow up," he said with all the seriousness a 12-year-old could summon, "I'll come back and marry you." Ilari looked at him, a little surprised, but then smiled wide, her cheeks glowing brighter than before. "Then I'll—" "Wait," she said, her fingers curling around his. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, something pure and strong, beyond their age. But as dawn neared, a loud siren blared from the embassy far behind. Callan jumped up, heart pounding. A sudden message had gone out to all Terran staff. A political incident had erupted between the humans and Velithari, and everyone was to return to the shuttle immediately. Guards were already searching for him. Ilari's smile faded as fear crossed her face. "Will they take you away?" she asked. Callan nodded, his throat tight. "I have to go," he said, backing away, his voice breaking. She took a step forward, but he was already running. He paused at the top of the hill, turned and shouted with all his heart, "I'll come back. I promise." She stood there, silent in the wind, her glow dimming as the human boy disappeared into the trees. Callan didn't know that was the last peaceful day Velithar would see for many years, nor did he know that war would soon touch every star in that part of the galaxy, including this one. He was too young to understand the weight of promises made under moonlight. But far above them, beyond the clouds and the quiet meadows, old forces were already stirring forces that would not forget that promise either. Commander Callan Ward stood tall at the front of the Terran starcruiser Vigilant Dawn, his eyes locked on the distant shimmer of a planet he had not seen in more than 15 years. Velithar. The name alone pulled at a memory, buried deep in his mind, a memory wrapped in moonlight and laughter, of a promise spoken by a boy who had believed anything was possible. But that promise had long since faded beneath layers of duty, war, and the quiet grief that came with watching dreams turn into old stories. Callan had become a different man, a soldier, a diplomat, and sometimes, when necessary, a weapon. Now, Velithor had gone dark. All communication with the planet had stopped 3 cycles ago, and no one knew why. The High Command had chosen Callan to lead a diplomatic recon mission, not only because he knew the planet, but because he once had something there, a connection they believed might still be useful. As the cruiser moved closer to Velithor's orbit, the crew fell silent. The planet did not look like the bright, peaceful world from Callan's childhood. Its atmosphere pulsed with strange energy signatures, and thick rings of broken satellites and old war debris now encircled it like a crown of ruin. Scans showed no signs of welcoming beacons or docking channels. Instead, the cruiser was met with silence and static. "Sir, no response from the Velithari capital," reported Lieutenant Kira, glancing at him with concern. "But we're detecting faint power readings on the surface. Something's alive down there." Callan narrowed his eyes. "Prepare a drop team," he said. "We go down in peace, but stay alert." The shuttle descended through thick clouds, lightning crackling in the distance. As they neared the surface, Callan saw the capital city once full of graceful towers and glowing walkways now shadowed and cracked. Its buildings darkened as though mourning. They landed near the ancient palace grounds, where once he had shared a quiet moment with a girl who shimmered like the stars. Soldiers in cloaked armor surrounded the shuttle before the ramp even dropped. Weapons were raised. Callan stepped forward with his hands up. "We come in peace by order of the Terran Alliance," he said firmly. One of the cloaked figures stepped forward and removed their hood. Callan's heart skipped. It was her Ilari. No longer a child, she stood taller, her once soft features sharpened by years of battle. Her glow was dimmer now, edged with scars of energy and fire. "You said you would return," she said in a voice cold as steel, but Callan heard the pain beneath it. "But you bring soldiers, not love." He tried to speak, but no words came. She turned and gestured, and the Velithari guards led the Terrans into the palace, now more fortress than home. Inside, the halls were dark and quiet, lit only by flickering crystal lanterns. Callan noticed the broken symbols on the walls, the missing tapestries, and the eyes of those who watched him, suspicious, angry, tired. He was not a guest here. He was a question mark. "We were attacked," Ilari said finally, as they sat across from each other in a chamber that smelled of old stone and burned incense. "Years ago, a race called the Drexari descended on our world. Machines without mercy. They broke our sky, shattered our rings, and tried to rewrite our minds. We fought them off, barely. We asked for help, but none came." Callan's jaw clenched. He had heard whispers of Drexari incursions at the borders, but no one had reported a full invasion. "We didn't know," he said quietly. "No signal got through. We would have come." She looked at him, eyes unreadable. "Would you have come? Or were you too busy making promises elsewhere?" The sting in her words was sharper than any blade. He remembered her waiting on that hill, remembered the look on her face as the shuttle doors closed. "I was a child," he said, "but I meant it." Ilari stood, her back straight. "Then prove it," she said. "You will undergo the trial of Oathfire. It will test your heart, your memory, your truth. If you survive, perhaps we can speak again." And with that, she was gone. Callan was taken to a deep underground chamber, where ancient symbols covered the stone. Flames of blue and silver danced along the walls. A Velithari elder approached, holding a crystal sphere. "Enter with a clear mind," the elder said. The flame sees truth, it burns lies. Callan stepped forward. The moment he touched the sphere, pain exploded in his mind. He was pulled into memory, not just seeing it, but living it, his younger self, running through the meadow, laughing with Ilari, shouting that promise. Then war, screams, fire. He saw the battles he had fought, the faces of those he had lost, the orders he had followed without question. The flame showed him doubts, regrets, the people he could not save. It whispered his name like a curse, then like a cry. "Do you still remember?" A voice asked, not his own, but hers, echoing through the vision. "Or have you buried me too?" Callan dropped to his knees. "I never forgot," he said through clenched teeth. "I tried to forget, but I couldn't. You were always there. Every night, every time I looked at the stars." The flames surged higher, surrounding him in light and heat until he thought it would consume him. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The chamber dimmed. The elder watched him, silent. Ilari appeared in the doorway. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes held something different, now something less cold, more searching. "You survived," she said. "Few do." Callan stood, slowly, every muscle aching. "I meant what I said," he whispered, "and I'm still here." She didn't answer, but turned and walked away. He followed. The palace was still quiet, but the silence was no longer hostile. That night, Callan lay awake in a guest chamber, staring at the ceiling, wondering what would come next. He had seen her again. She was alive. But the girl he remembered was gone, replaced by a queen who bore the weight of her world. Still, something in her eyes told him that part of her had waited, that part of her still believed. He didn't know what he had returned to. He didn't know what the future held. But he knew this. The past had found him, and the promise was no longer just a memory. It was alive. And somewhere in the shadows of Velithar, something darker was watching something that had not forgotten the Terrans, nor forgiven the flame that had burned their kind. The Drexari were not finished, not yet, and Callan Ward's return had just lit the match. Callan Ward woke to the cold silence of stone walls and flickering blue lanterns, the kind of light that made everything feel like a dream or a memory. He sat up slowly on the small cot in the chamber Ilari had given him, his muscles still aching from the trial of Oathfire. The fire had shown him things he thought he had buried, fears, failures, and the face of a girl he had once promised to return to. Now she was a queen, and she was testing him again. A guard entered quietly and motioned for him to follow, saying only, "The queen awaits." Callan followed the silent hallways of the once great Velithari palace, where every wall whispered stories of battles fought and blood spilled. The elegant designs and glowing crystals were now chipped, faded, and darkened, like the soul of the planet itself. They entered a chamber shaped like a spiral, filled with hovering lights and a thin, Armaisty that clung to the air. Ilari stood at the center, dressed in ceremonial robes, woven with threads of light, her face unreadable. Around her, elders and commanders watched in silence. "The trial of Oathfire showed you carry truth," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "But truth alone is not enough. If you are to stand beside me or claim to honor your promise, you must face the second test." Callan didn't speak, just nodded. Ilari raised her hand, and the lights dimmed. A platform rose from the ground with 3 smooth stones set in a circle, each glowing faintly with shifting colors. "These are called veil stones," she explained. "One holds a memory from me, one a secret of Velithar, and one a lie planted by the Drexari." She looked him in the eye. "Choose wrongly, and you will lose your mind for hours or days. Choose wisely, and I will know your spirit is still your own." Callan stepped forward, the silence pressing in around him like a weight. He knelt before the stones, each pulsing with strange warmth. He closed his eyes, reached out, and touched the first stone. A wave of laughter hit him, his own, and hers, running through glowing trees. A soft promise beneath the stars. Then silence. He opened his eyes. The second stone called to him with a low hum. When he touched it, a darker image flashed before him. A locked chamber below the palace, filled with broken machines and sealed doors, surrounded by whispered voices. Then the hum turned into a scream. He pulled away. The final stone throbbed with light. As he reached for it, he hesitated. His fingers brushed it, and suddenly his mind was filled with images of destruction. Humans in armor burning Velithari cities, Ilari crying in chains, a blade in his own hand, dripping with light. The vision twisted, warped, and shattered. He gasped and fell backward. The lie, he had found the lie. He pointed to the third stone, breathing hard. "That one is false. It's not memory, it's poison." Ilari stared at him for a long time. Then she stepped forward and crushed the stone beneath her heel. "Correct," she said. "The Drexari left mental traps hidden across our world visions, meant to turn us against our allies." Her voice softened slightly. "Not many can see through it without breaking." Callan straightened. "I've seen too much to fall for tricks," he said. "And I know you. The real you." A faint glow returned to her face. Not quite a smile, but something near it. "Then maybe you're still the boy who made that promise." As she turned to leave, an alarm rang out loud, sharp, and urgent. Everyone froze. A guard rushed in, armor scorched. "There's been an attack on the old observatory," he said. "Something breached the outer field. We lost contact with the patrol." Ilari's calm shattered. "The Drexari?" she asked. "No confirmation," the guard said, "but something moved like them. Fast, silent, deadly." Without a word, Ilari spun and strode from the room. Callan followed without being told. They boarded a skiff and flew over the broken rooftops toward the observatory, a towering ruin at the edge of the city. As they landed, they saw the shattered bodies of Velithari scouts, their armor melted through. A strange black metal spike had been driven into the ground nearby, pulsing with dark energy. Ilari approached it slowly, her hand glowing with warning light. "This isn't just an attack," she said grimly. "It's a message." Callan crouched by the spike. He saw symbols etched into its surface, Drexari script, but shaped strangely. "This is a probe," he muttered. "Scouting. Testing defenses. They're planning something bigger." Just then, a soft whine rose in the air. A shape flickered in the trees, smooth, insect-like, and cloaked in shadow. Callan didn't think, just drew his sidearm and fired. The shadow dodged with impossible speed and lunged at Ilari. She raised her hand and sent a wave of light crashing into it, sending the creature flying backward. It slammed into a tree and vanished into dust. The soldiers nearby stared, shaken. "That was a recon drone," one of them whispered. "They're already inside the city." Ilari looked at Cowan. "Come with me," she said. "There's something you need to see." They returned to the palace and descended into the lower chambers, areas sealed long ago. At the end of a corridor hidden behind a forgotten wall, she opened a door made of pure crystal. Inside was a vault of ancient Velithari technology devices, scrolls and maps showing hidden tunnels beneath the surface of Velithar. "These were our ancestors' war plans," she said, "left behind in case the Drexari ever returned." She handed him a map. They planned a tunnel beneath the capital. It's the same strategy they used against the Altharian worlds before they fell. "We thought we destroyed the last of their tunneling drones, but we were wrong." Callan scanned the map. "Then we strike first," he said. "Seal the tunnels, destroy the entrance points, force them to reveal themselves." Ilari nodded. "You will lead the operation. You know human tactics. We need that now." Callan hesitated. "You trust me with this?" She looked at him, the glow in her eyes softening. "You passed the Queen's test, not just the stones, but this." She placed a hand on her chest. "I see your heart, and I believe it still beats for this world." Callan's voice was quiet. It always did. She stepped back. "Then prepare. The next move is ours." As Callan left to organize the strike team, he felt a strange mix of fear and purpose. The promise he made in childhood had drawn him back, but now that promise was tied to something far greater. The fate of Velithar was at stake, and the Drexari were no longer shadows. They were coming. As night fell over the city, and lights blinked out one by one, Callan stood at the edge of the balcony and looked toward the dark horizon, where the earth itself began to tremble. The Queen's test was over. The real war was about to begin. The halls of Velithar's ancient palace stood tall and silent under the eerie glow of twin moons, their silver light casting long shadows along the cracked walls and broken pillars, while the wind outside howled like a warning from a world still wounded by war and invasion. But inside, within the royal chamber, a deeper wound was beginning to fester, one not of fire or metal, but of betrayal. Callan Ward, still wearing the dust and soot of the tunnel strike mission, stood before a gathering of Velithari elders and high-ranking commanders, delivering a report of their successful attack against one of the hidden Drexari excavation sites, deep beneath the capital's edge, where they had destroyed an underground hive before the machines could fully awaken. But as he spoke, he noticed the elders exchanging looks not of triumph, but of tension, their eyes shifting too often, too quickly, and the air grew thick with something unspoken. Ilari entered the chamber last, her presence commanding silence, her armor gleaming faintly with Velithari starlight, her expression as unreadable as ever. Yet Callan saw a flicker of worry behind her calm, and before she could speak, a sharp voice rang out from the edge of the circle. General Theron, one of the oldest military leaders, known for his strict loyalty and his scars earned in the last Drexari siege, rose to his feet and stepped into the center, his glare fixed not on Ilari but on Callan. "This human," he growled, his voice filled with force, "has brought the machines back upon our soil. His arrival marked the beginning of this new war, And now we are supposed to believe that it is just coincidence? The chamber fell into a shocked silence, and Callan stared at the general, stunned, while Ellery's eyes narrowed dangerously. But before she could intervene, Theron raised a hand and continued. Ever since his ship entered orbit, we've seen disruptions in our defenses, breaches in our surveillance, and corrupted energy grids. How can we know this is not all a trick? Perhaps the Drexari didn't come back. Perhaps they were led back by him. And with that he pointed a shaking finger at Callan, whose chest tightened with anger, confusion, and disbelief. "You're wrong," Callan said, stepping forward, voice steady despite the storm inside. I've risked my life to protect this world, not just now, but when I first made a promise to your queen, when I was just a child and your world was still whole." But Theron wasn't listening, and neither were several of the other commanders who now whispered among themselves, doubt and fear blooming like poison. Ilari finally raised her hand, silencing the chamber, her voice hard as crystal. "Enough Callan Ward has passed the trial of Oathfire and the Queen's test, which none of you have dared face in decades, and yet you question him while hiding behind shadows and fear. But the damage was done, and Callan could see it. The court was splintering, and someone somewhere was helping it fall apart." After the assembly broke, Ilari summoned Callan to her private tower, high above the main palace, where the sky stretched endlessly and the stars flickered like distant watchers. And there she revealed what she had suspected, but not spoken aloud, that someone inside her court had been secretly feeding information to the Drexari, disabling certain defenses, hiding reports, and falsifying records, which explained how the machines had struck so precisely, how they had known where to tunnel, and where the patrols were weakest. "Someone close to me is working against us," she said quietly, her voice barely more than a whisper. "And we must find out who before the next breach ends us all." Callan agreed to investigate from within, not as a soldier, but as a shadow, someone unnoticed, someone expected to be nothing more than a foreign guest. And that night he began watching, listening, and asking questions that seemed casual, yet cut deep. He visited the archives, where records of patrol patterns had been altered, always under the authorization of the same sigil, a minor counselor named Lethan, quiet and unassuming, who rarely spoke during meetings, but whose name appeared too often in the wrong places. Callan followed him one evening through the lower halls, careful to stay hidden, until he saw Lethan slip into a chamber lit by green light, where a communication crystal glowed faintly with Drexari frequency, and there, in a whispering voice, Lethan spoke into the device, giving coordinates for the next strike and mentioning a secret chamber beneath the throne room. Callan recorded the moment with his suit's internal sensor, then returned to Ilari before dawn. She listened without a word, then summoned her personal guard and moved swiftly. But when they arrived at the chamber, Lethan was gone and the crystal shattered, burned to ash. A message had been left behind, etched into the wall with Drexari plasma. "The Queen cannot save you," it read, and Ilari stared at it for a long time before turning to Callan, saying, "The next strike will not come from below, it will come from within the palace itself." Sure enough, only hours later, during a ceremonial gathering to honor the fallen scouts, a hidden device exploded near the east wing, collapsing part of the palace and killing 3 of the elder advisors. Panic spread. Soldiers turned on each other in confusion, and in the chaos, Someone attempted to seize control of the Royal Command codes, nearly overriding the planetary shields before being stopped by Palace AI failsafes. Ilari was shaken, her authority now openly challenged, and her guard shrinking in loyalty as fear grew like fire through the halls. Callan stood beside her as she stared out the broken window, watching the smoke rise above the city, and she said, "We cannot fight the Drexari with half of Velithur at war with itself. We must end this division now." Callan thought for a long moment, then said, "We don't just need to expose the traitor. We need to make them show their face in front of everyone." Together, they devised a plan. Ilari would announce a false relocation of the throne's core defense systems to a chamber beneath the Temple of Stars, a place sacred but vulnerable, and they would wait to see who tried to sabotage it. Within 2 nights the trap was set, and sure enough, cloaked figures moved through the temple shadows, reaching the hidden chamber only to find Callan waiting with a squad of hidden guards, who sprang the ambush as soon as the saboteurs activated their tech. The figures fought back with Drexari weapons, confirming their betrayal, and when the masks fell, Lethan stood among them, eyes cold and blank, not with fear, but with something worse, devotion. "You think we betrayed Velithur," he said, as they dragged him into the main hall. "But Velithur betrayed us long ago. We saw the truth in the machine's eyes. They offer order, purpose, eternity. Your queen offers only pain." Ilari looked down at him, not with anger, but with sorrow, and said, "Then you are already lost." With the traitors exposed and their network revealed, the palace slowly began to heal, but the wounds were deep, and trust would take time to return. Callan remained close to Ilari, their bond growing stronger with each passing day, their childhood promise no longer a faint memory, but a fire between them. Yet even as peace returned for a moment, they both knew it would not last. The Drexari were moving faster now, their strikes more direct, their whispers more dangerous, and deep in the stars above, something ancient was stirring, watching Velithur and waiting for the final act to begin. The skies above Velithur darkened not with clouds, but with dread, as Drexari warships, sharp and black like knives of shadow, tore through the atmosphere with no warning and no mercy, filling the horizon with fire and silence, the kind of silence that came just before a world screamed. Callan Ward stood on the highest tower of the Velithari Palace, his eyes on the burning edge of the city where defense towers flickered, struggling to stay online, and his breath caught in his throat not from fear, but from the weight of what? He now knew this was it, the final assault, the last stand, the moment all his choices, promises, and battles had led to. Beside him stood Ilari, not only the queen of Velithur now, but the soul of a people who had lost too much and still stood tall, her armor glowing faintly with the light of ancient Velithari crystal, her expression calm but hard, her gaze focused, not on the enemy, but on her people, as they rushed to prepare for the battle to come. The city below was a storm of motion, civilians being moved into shielded sanctuaries, soldiers running to defense lines, engineers working to power up the final layer of the planetary barrier. And yet, even with all the chaos, there was a strange sense of unity, of purpose, as though Velithur itself had decided it would not die quietly. Callan had worked with Ilari through the night before, planning a last line of defense, activating forgotten systems buried in the roots of the city. reawakening the old planetary guardians and uploading a virus into the city-wide network that would disable Drexari drones within a certain range, but time was short and the enemy was fast. As dawn broke through smoke and fire, the first wave of Drexari machines came in low, fast and silent, gliding like black snakes through the ruins, their eyes glowing with cold blue light, their blades humming softly. Callan led the charge with a special unit of both human and Velithari fighters, their weapons synchronized through a new hybrid command system he had designed as symbol of the growing trust between the two species. The battle was brutal from the first moment, the machines adapting quickly, using the broken buildings as cover, but Callan's team fought with desperate fury, holding ground inch by inch, buying time for Alari's master plan to fall into place one, that relied on ancient Velithari energy conduits that could supercharge the entire city's defense matrix for a short time. The conduits, however, had been long dormant, and to reactivate them, someone had to go to the central node beneath the throne room, a place half collapsed and crawling with Drexari infiltrators. Callan volunteered without hesitation, diving through fire and rubble with a strike team, blasting through wave after wave of enemies, and reaching the node chamber just as the machines breached the outer line. Inside he found the old system still functional, but barely, its core flickering like a dying heart, and he connected his suit directly to it, forcing the virus upload, then manually reactivating the energy flow. A surge of light burst through the veins of the city, lighting the streets, towers, and walls with glowing threads, and for the first time in hours the Drexari forces staggered, some collapsing where they stood. But victory was not certain above. The warships began to descend, preparing to unleash their main weapons, ones powerful enough to break through even the city's final shield. Ilari, seeing this, gave the command to activate the Celestial. Cannon, a weapon of legend, hidden beneath the Temple of Stars, powered by the lifeblood of the planet itself, and only usable once, for it would drain the core beyond repair. It was a choice no queen wanted to make, for in saving her people, she would doom her world to darkness. But there was no time for doubt. She moved swiftly to the temple, Callan rejoining her just as the enemy ships locked onto the capital, and together they entered the chamber, where a massive sphere of energy hovered above a deep pit, pulsing like a star trapped underground. The weapon required 2 keys, one from the queen and one from the chosen defender, and without speaking they stepped forward and placed their hands on the crystal consoles, feeling a deep hum rise through their bones as the ancient machine awakened. Lights exploded outward in a wave, reaching for the sky, wrapping around the capital like a cocoon, and the cannon fired not a beam, but a storm of light and sound that tore through the warships above, cracking hulls, melting engines, and throwing the Drexari fleet into chaos. Explosions filled the sky, and for a brief moment silence returned, not the silence of fear, but of awe. But the cost was instant. The ground shook violently, the light in the temple dimmed, and across Velithar, systems began to fail, lights flickered, and the great shield fell. Ilari dropped to her knees, her energy drained from the weapon's link, and Callan caught her before she could fall further, holding her as she gasped for breath, her voice weak but steady, saying, "We broke them, but we broke ourselves." 2. Even as the main Drexari fleet scattered, a final ground assault, began a desperate last move by the machines to overrun the palace and finish what they had started. Callan carried Ilari to the top floor of the palace, where the final defenders had gathered, a mix of soldiers, citizens, and elders armed with whatever they could hold. And there, with the sun setting behind clouds of ash, the last stand began. Wave after wave of machines stormed the palace gates, but the defenders held, using every trick, every weapon, every ounce of strength they had. Callan fought like a man with nothing left to lose, his body aching, blood running down his arm, but he never fell not when a Drexari behemoth broke through the main gate, not when a second wave of drones tried to flank them through the garden walls, not even when one of the elders was struck down beside him. Ilari, too weak to fight, remained at the center of the final chamber, sending out commands and messages to rally distant survivors, her voice keeping hope alive even when the walls began to crack. And then, at the darkest moment, when it seemed like the machines would finally break through, something changed. Distant roars echoed through the sky, and ships appeared above, marked with the colors of Earth and other allied worlds, human. Reinforcements drawn by the signal Callan had sent days ago, finally arriving. Drop pods rained down like stars, and soldiers poured out, blasting through the Drexari flank with fury and precision, pushing them back, turning the tide. The machines, sensing defeat, began to retreat, their command signals disrupted by a final virus surge launched by Velithari engineers in the city's heart. And within minutes, the battlefield fell silent, the enemy gone, the palace still standing, though barely. Callan stood among the wreckage, breathing heavily, his armor cracked, his hands shaking, and he looked at the rising dawn, not with victory, but with sorrow. For Velithar had survived, but only just. Ilari was taken to the healing chambers, and Callan stood by her side, watching her recover, knowing that their bond had been tested by war, and had survived. Outside, the city slowly began to rebuild, its people emerging from shelters, its skies clearing at last. But deep in the core of Velithar, the light that had once powered a great world was now fading, the price of survival etched into every stone, every shadow. Still, hope remained, for in the ashes of war a new promise was born, not just between a human and an alien queen, but between two peoples who had stood together at the edge of ruin and chosen to fight as one. Years passed since the final battle of Velithar, and the world that had once burned with fire and screams now lay quiet under a sky filled with hope and change, its people rebuilding city by city, tower by tower, even as the planet's once great power core dimmed beneath the ground. Callan Ward had stayed through the years of healing, not as a soldier anymore, but as a builder, a bridge between Earth and Velithar, a man who had once been a stranger and now walked among them as a brother, yet the old promise he had made as a child, whispered to a young princess under a sky of falling stars, still echoed in his heart, and though he had fulfilled his vow by returning and fighting beside her, part of that promise had never been spoken aloud, the part that mattered most, and now it waited for him at the edge of a new dawn. Ilari, the queen of a wounded but living world, had changed too, her strength no longer just in her voice or blade, but in the quiet way she led her people back from the edge of despair, her words soft yet sharp, her decisions heavy but wise. And though the bond between her and Callan had deepened with every season, Neither had spoken of what lay beneath their silence, what had grown from ashes and battlefields into something neither war nor peace could shake. The two of them had stood together in every decision since the last stand, from reuniting the royal court to negotiating the first interstellar council between Velithor and Earth. But now something new loomed on the horizon, something both personal and greater than politics. The first starship from Velithor was ready, built not for war, but for journeying into the stars, to search for knowledge, allies, and maybe even remnants of the Drexari threat, which had gone silent, but not forgotten. The ship, named Seraphel, after the guardian spirit of Velithari myths, was a marvel of human and alien design, sleek, bright, powered by a hybrid core made from Earth's ion drives, and what little remained of Velithor's ancient energy conduits. And Callan had been asked to command its maiden voyage, a gesture of trust, honor, and future, but it came with a choice, for the journey could last years, and not all who left would return. The night before launch, Callan walked through the palace gardens, where light flowers glowed softly, and the air carried the scent of starless trees. And there he found Ilari standing beneath the crystal arch where they had once spoken as children, where the stars above had seemed like dreams too far to reach, and now they stood within reach, yet carried new weight. "So you leave tomorrow," she said, not as a question, but a truth, and Callan nodded, his hands behind his back, his heart uncertain. "I do unless you ask me to stay," he said gently, and Ilari turned to face him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes holding something deeper, something ancient and raw. "Would you stay if I asked?" she whispered, and Callan stepped closer. "Only if you asked with your heart, not your crown." And for a moment there was silence between them, broken only by the wind through the leaves and the faint hum of distant stars. "I cannot ask," she said finally, her voice quiet, "because you already know what I want." And then she placed something into his hand, a small crystal ring, shaped like a Velithari star, the same one they had spoken of as children, the symbol of union between two souls across the stars. And Callan looked down at it, then up at her, and he said, "Then I will return, not just as commander, but as the man who keeps his promises." And Ilari nodded, her voice steady. "And I will wait, even if the stars forget your name, I will wait." The next morning, with the entire capital gathered to witness history, the Seraphel rose from its launch platform like a bird of light, guided by honor, memory, and dreams, and Callan stood at its helm with a crew of Velithari and humans alike, setting a course beyond known charts, chasing signals that might lead to new dangers or lost civilizations, or the final shadow of the Drexari. For though their threat had faded, traces still remained in deep space, in strange readings from forgotten moons and whispers from outposts that went dark. The journey was long, filled with strange worlds and cold voids, battles with pirates who preyed on the weak, discoveries of ruins left by civilizations long gone, and always Callan carried with him the ring, kept close in a hidden pocket near his heart, never worn but never far, a promise that burned brighter with each star they passed. Years passed like seconds and lifetimes, and on one cold, dark planet in the edge of a red star system they found something terrifying, an old Drexara node, still active, still pulsing, but empty, its command signal fractured, its core broken, its last message repeating over and over in a voice not machine, but human. A recording left by someone Callan once knew, a researcher lost during the First War, her final words a warning. The Drexari were never just machines, they were vessels. They were searching for something to become, and the message ended with coordinates deeper than any ship had traveled. Callan stared at the data, knowing that following it might mean no return, but he also knew the danger could not be ignored, not if he ever wanted to keep the world he had helped save truly safe. He sent a final message back to Velither, encrypted and simple. The shadow still moves. I will find its heart. Wait for me, and with that, he and a select team took the Seraphel deeper into uncharted space, into a region where the stars blinked like tired eyes. And there they found it, not a fleet, not a weapon, but a cradle, an ancient Drexari seed world, where machine and thought had tried to merge, or something had gone wrong, and what remained was dying, reaching out, calling to minds strong enough to resist or join it. Callan made the hardest choice of his life. He interfaced with the core, risking his mind, trusting the hybrid tech in his suit, and the strength of the promise he carried. And for hours he drifted in a place without time, surrounded by whispers of code and pain, until he found the last fragment of Drexari will, and shattered it, not with violence, but with memory, with the voice of Ilari calling him back, with the image of stars shared and rebuilt. When he woke, the core was dark, the signals silent, the war finally over, and the stars, for the first time in ages, peaceful. Months later, the Seraphel returned to Velither, its hull scarred, its lights dim, but its journey complete. And when it descended over the palace once more, a cheer rose so loud it seemed to shake the sky. Ilari stood waiting, dressed not in armor but in white, the same color as the ancient star ceremony, and Callan stepped down the ramp, older, tired, but smiling, holding the ring in his hand now, ready to place it where it belonged. And there, before the people of Velither and the stars above, they fulfilled the promise made in childhood, not with grand words or glowing crowns, but with a simple touch, a shared look, and the knowledge that peace once earned must be guarded. Always not just by warriors, but by love that survives even the coldest shadow of space.